living a good life greatly depends on what type of questions we ask ourselves and how much time and dedication we also spend trying to figure them out. The thing is that a lot of questions that we try to answer during the course of our lifetime are unanswerable, and so we just waste a lot of time fixating on the wrong things. With that in mind, I have 4 key points that I believe to be extremely useful when trying to decide what type of questions are most important for us. The first metric is this question answerable? If a question doesn't have an answer, then don't spend much time on it because you won't get an answer. And so here I understand that there is some layer of complexity because not all questions are supposed to be answered. Some questions are just created in order to find out better questions. But from a pragmatic viewpoint, if you cannot answer a question, if you have no means to fully examine it, then it most likely isn't very pertinent, and so just don't spend too much time on it. Of course, this also depends on what type of questioning you are doing, because if you are questioning for the sake of science, of course, we need to meet 2 criteria, which is testability and falsifiability. So you need a question that can be testable and a question that is vulnerable to being falsified, meaning proven wrong. The second point is that when formulating a question, you need to be careful if the question is formulated in a way that will bias your answer. So the question, what is the meaning of life, already assumes that life has a meaning. So it already biases you to assuming that life does have a meaning, and now it's only just a matter of figuring out what meaning life has. A different question would be, for example, does life have meaning? In this question, you have more degrees of freedom because you start with the possibility that life does not have any meaning. And if life does have meaning, then you can further ask the question of what meaning does life have? Another example of this is asking the question, why is lying immoral? Here you're already assuming that lying is immoral.
What's happened?
Rather than asking yourself the first question of, is lying immoral? You can have countless examples of this, but this is an extremely important aspect, especially these days, where this topic of prompt engineering, of being able to devise proper questions, is coming up a lot, especially due to the widespread use of AI technologies. And our ability to ask questions that do not bias what type of answer we will have, and that do not make a lot of assumptions, is very important. The third pointer is asking yourself, does this question change my life? What are the implications of answering this question? A lot of questions that we ask ourselves don't really change our lives. They're very speculative. I mean, if you were to record the train of thoughts and questions that we ask ourselves, you would probably find out that our mental scripts are sort of Kafkaesque. They're just fragmented pieces of logic. They're very wild, and oftentimes they have very little relevance. Here I can use the example of the parable of the arrow, which is a Buddhist Theravada parable, which is essentially a case where a man gets shot by an arrow, and instead of focusing on actually getting help for the arrow, removing it, he asks the question, what is the material that this arrow was made of? Who shot the arrow? What was the character of the person who shot the arrow? So basically the main message here is that oftentimes we are faced with situations that require action and that require different lines of thinking, and we get stuck on questions that are detrimental towards our situation and the least bit pragmatic. Once again, every question that you ask does not necessarily need to change your life, but if you realize that regardless of what answer you come up with, that basically has no impact in your life, also do not dedicate much time to it. The last pointer is that the question you make should have all of its terms properly defined. So this is a big issue in discussions. For example, when we are discussing consciousness, several people use different definitions, and then they enter these debates, and because they have different definitions, they're not able to agree on anything. They're effectively discussing a different thing. Angry. I picked the example of consciousness, but you can pick basically any sort of topic. I mean, even a very common misconception is, for example, the use of the word illusion.
You're just an illusion.
A lot of times people think that an illusion is something that doesn't exist, but it's not. An illusion is something that seems a certain way, but it's actually something else. So properly clarifying the terms of your question is extremely important, because if you don't have properly defined terms, you're not going to get a good answer, and you probably won't be able to build a meaningful model that can extract insight. So overall, these were just some pointers if you're stuck in overthinking. If you're like me, you have likely dedicated a lot of time to questions that don't really matter. And the goal of this video is not to say, of course, that we always need to have a pragmatic or a functional element to everything we do, because sometimes it is perfectly fine to follow our curiosity and just engage with ideas and see what comes up. But if you're struggling with spending a lot of time in fruitless questions that are generating anxiety, I believe that if you keep these four elements in mind, that will be highly beneficial for you. So let me know if you enjoyed this video, if you disagree or agree with what I said, and if you would like me to cover any other topic related to science, please let me know. I would happily do that.